Marco, thank you very much for coming to the Big Gas Debate tonight. It's very nice to have you in London. So I wanted to ask you a few questions about the LNG market. So how much do you think the low oil price will impact LNG projects?
I think that more than oil prices is really low gas prices that are impacting the development of new projects. Most new contracts are being signed at indexation that are different than oil. And so in the future we will see that unless gas prices recover, as well as oil prices for the projects that have some liquid content in it, we will not see a lot of projects moving quickly.
Right. And how do you think this affects also projects that need to be project financed?
Well, they are in particular danger. So I think the projects that will move ahead are the projects that are backed by solid financial sponsors or strong balance sheet if it is smaller projects. And for existing projects, I don't think that that is a big issue because they have enjoyed a period of sustained prices with costs that were very low early in the decade. So I'm sure that they have enough cash to repay the debt.
Right. And how do you feel the geopolitical situation impacts the LNG market in general?
We will see in the coming years Iran, Kurdistan becoming significant supplier of gas, potentially to Europe, potentially to local markets in the Gulf, and maybe also to the Far East. So I think the geopolitics are becoming something that is less serious than in the past, although we have some hot spots. And the fact is that we have multiple supplies right now for gas from Russia, North Africa, the United States, Australia, from all over.
Right. So just a quick question about tonight and the debate. I know you're speaking, so you're not allowed to vote, but what will be your strongest argument to propose the motion that says that this House believes that LNG will remain a buyer's market beyond 2020? What's your strongest argument here?
One is demand. Today we have alternatives to gas use in renewables, in storage, in energy efficiency. And the second is that LNG is on the margin, on the gas merit order curve. And so in a market that has demand concerns, you don't want to be on the margin. You want to be on the low price gas that is pipeline gas.
Thank you so much, Marco. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Peter. Thank you so much for coming tonight to the Big Gas Debate in London. I just wanted to ask you a few questions about the LNG market. So how do you think the low oil price impact the LNG industry?
I think it clearly has an effect on the ability of high-cost projects to proceed. Some projects in the world that will be looking for oil-linked contracts will need to find ways of reducing their cost.
Right.
It obviously has an impact on prices in the market at the moment as well, reducing prices around the world. But I think there are projects, particularly in the US, that actually are really not changed as a result of the lower oil price. I think you'll still see progress being made on some of those.
What about projects that need project financing?
Depending on, again, cost base and where they are in the process of getting project financing, oil prices at $65, $70 shouldn't mean that they're not viable if they are economic to a relatively low oil price and if they still make money at a relatively low oil price. So they can still be financed, they can still raise money. The same questions are still there around creditworthiness of off-takers and commercial structure and the overall robustness of the chain, but the oil price per se shouldn't necessarily impact their ability to get financed.
I see. And more in general about the geopolitics, how do you feel current geopolitics is influencing the LNG industry?
I think LNG has always been impacted by politics, by geopolitics, and I guess that impact changes over time. I don't see anything at the moment that necessarily means certain places are too difficult for LNG projects to happen, or that gives an advantage to developments elsewhere. I think it comes down to economics, commercial structure, and how straightforward it is to actually put together new projects.
And what about potential new suppliers that could come up, like Iran, for example, other countries that could start being gas suppliers?
I mean, Iran has been trying to develop LNG export for a very long time. Maybe the conditions are improving with their ability to do that, but LNG projects take a long time to put together. They, like any projects in the world, will still need to find buyers. They'll still need to have an economic project. They'll need to have a commercial model that works. So I don't think they have a particular disadvantage, except that they are maybe not as far advanced as projects elsewhere in the world that have been under development for longer.
Thank you. And more about tonight.
Yes.
You are obviously speaking in the debate and you're opposing the motion. So you are opposing the motion that is this House believe LNG will remain a buyer's market beyond 2020. What is going to be your strongest argument to oppose that motion? Is this your key, your secret?
My strongest argument is that the very concept of a buyer's market is outdated.
All right.
That we're in a much more complex world today. That is really a concept from yesterday's LNG industry, not tomorrow's.
All right. Good. Well, good debate, and thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you.
So just to tell you a bit behind the reason we're holding this debate, we essentially wanted to bring the gas community together, but we wanted to take it out of our usual 2-day conference structure and perhaps get people to be a bit freer with things they were saying and outside of the traditional conference format, and get people's views on what they really believe and help people talk a bit more freely and be a bit more controversial. So that's the idea behind the debate. Last year was the first one. We debated Russia's future as the dominant gas supplier to Europe, and we saw a resounding victory to the House. And after that success last year, we wanted to really make it an annual thing. So this year, the focus is on LNG. So in recent history, the LNG market has been taken by surprise due to a variety of factors, from the dramatic Fukushima accident leading to unprecedented impact on demand to severe supply disruptions. So everyone's talking about oil price levels and the effect on the LNG market, but the LNG industry is also influenced by numerous other factors, from technological to political. And changes in any one factor may affect the entire LNG market. So with this in mind, it seemed that the only constant in the industry appears to be this unpredictable change. So we thought it would be a really interesting debate to talk about LNG. I'd like to thank our debaters and our moderator this evening, Professor Stern, a great moderator because I'm confident he probably knows everyone in the room. So if you don't ask questions, please be aware that he'll probably just pick on you. And thank you to our two debaters. Proposing the motion, we have Marco Arcelli, the EVP Upstream from Enel, and this year's opposer is Peter Thompson from Gas Strategies. And two final thank yous. Firstly to Argus Media for sponsoring this evening's event. I'm sure they are the first place many people in this room go for data and news on the LNG market. And finally, thanks to Hogan Lovells. Richard Tyler and his energy and natural resources team have a wealth of experience in gas and LNG, and we're so grateful that once again they have provided this perfect facility for us this evening. Thank you again to all of you for joining us. Many of my team are here and we'll love to have a drink with you upstairs later. We'd love to hear your feedback on this or any of our recent conferences or reports. And I also hope to see many of you at the European Gas Conference in Vienna next January. Thank you very much. Enjoy the evening. I'd now like to hand over to Jonathan. Thank you.
Hannah, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. And I think you know, if you were here last year, you will know what the format is, but I will tell you anyway. Each of our protagonists get 10 minutes, but I'm encouraging them to be more like 7 minutes to talk about the motion, which I remind you is this House believes the buyer's market for LNG will last beyond 2020. We will then have a lively discussion, and as Hannah told you, if I do not see lively hands, I will start to point to people. And then after that, the protagonists will have 5 minutes each to sum up. And at the end of it, we will have a vote. Now, let me just tell you that the result of the vote as you came through the door, you signed bits of paper, was that for the motion, 53, against the motion, 17, and undecided 6. So it's a bit of work to do here. Absolutely, absolutely. But if you were here last year, you know that we had a similar majority, and it was not quite overturned, but the opposer did extremely well. So with that as an introduction, Marco, you've already been introduced. Welcome, and we look forward to what you have to say proposing the motion.
Thank you. Please. Not following. Thank you, Jonathan. Well, my side of the debate is so self-evident, and we saw it from the numbers that were presented, that most of you already agree with me. And that might have made me come a little bit unprepared, because you all agree already with me. And as a matter of fact, it might have given Peter a chance to study very thoroughly last night, struggling to find the arguments to support this, probably. But I couldn't really, dip the knife too deeply into Peter, because I was he was so kind to invite me to his reception last night, and so I must show some kind of thankfulness to you, and so I will not be too aggressive in my arguments. So I would start by saying that the market is long, extremely long. The evidence is that we have spot prices that are now below $10, which means that no one knows where to put the LNG. We have regasification plants in the US that are running basically at 0% load factor, in Europe at 10 to 20%, and Europe is the sink of LNG today. So it's really a long market, and I don't see any supporting evidence to see that this situation will change in the next 10, 15 years. The main reason for taking a bet that I want to be short LNG so that the market will be long, and I'm not saying gas, I'm saying LNG, is that LNG is on the margin in the gas merit order curve. And so if you have a boom, if you're struggling in bringing new capacity to market, yes, you're concerned about where your gas will come from, but I don't see anybody in the industry today really worrying about that, not even in a situation where you may have some geopolitical tensions in Ukraine or some tensions in North Africa and so on. And really the matter is a matter of demand and a matter of cost and policies to support consumption and production. And so I will tell you something about that. I will try to go through some numbers that are so self-evident that I think will make you agree and maybe move the 6 undecided, and hopefully none of the 53 who voted for the House, that the market will continue in this situation. So the first point is the fact that LNG is on the margin on gas supplies. Well, LNG, we are, by the way, an off-taker of LNG from Nigeria, from Qatar, from the United States, so we have some pretty good numbers to substantiate what I'm saying. And we're also, we've also been an investor in upstream in Russia, we are an investor in upstream in Algeria, in Italy, so we know the cost basis. And the cost basis says that pipeline gas into Europe is about $6, $7, including all the take that the local governments take in Russia or in Algeria or so on. LNG, you cannot bring LNG into Europe at less than $10, $11 under no conditions, even the new projects in the United States. So that means that basically with Russia near Europe and Russia near Asia actually also, they have the largest available resources, the most competitive available resources, and so certainly Russia, through their commercial strategy, will define whether the market for LNG will be short or long in Asia and in Europe. And those are the only two markets, because the United States have shale, and yes, now it's being slowed down, but the prices there are still below $3, and we don't see that changing soon. And Latin America and Africa will not need a lot of LNG. In Latin America, because LNG and even natural gas, domestic gas, cannot compete with renewables today, and I will come back to this point. In fact, if you see all the auctions for power generation in Brazil, they are all awarded to solar, to wind, to hydro plants, and no gas-fired plants. And in Africa, it will be developed only where you have gas, because otherwise it is too expensive, and they will just shift to renewables and microgrids. On the margin in Asia, I think that the concept there is a bit more tricky, and I think what I would like to point to is the commercial behavior of countries that are supposed to grow, like the Philippines, like Indonesia, like India, like Pakistan, and they're simply not signing new contracts for LNG because they say, at this price, my economy is not competitive. We've seen also China moving aggressively to try to reduce their gas demand through renewable installation, through energy efficiency, through coal, because they say with the price of labor, the trending price of labor that we see in our market, we will not be competitive, so we will die. And so we cannot develop all this gas, all this LNG. So there, it's not so much about gas versus gas, it's simply the fact that if they shift significantly to gas, their economy will grow at a much slower pace than we are anticipating. And the fact is that even if you take the IEA or other major studies about where gas demand will grow, it will grow where the gas is. So it will grow in North America. It will grow because they have local gas that will be available much cheaper than anywhere else. And it will grow in the Gulf. It will grow in producing countries because they have subsidies, because they're subsidizing demand to support economic growth. And we believe that subsidies over time will be relinquished because they cannot afford them. We see in the case of Egypt, which basically turned from an exporting country to an importing country. Now they're getting their act together, Malaysia in a similar position, Iran in a similar position. And so even that is going to be corrected. But basically, the bottom line is that nowhere is LNG cheaper than domestic or pipe gas. And so that will make LNG an interesting proposition only for the flexibility it offers. That is, by definition, a fraction of the total demand, and a marginal demand that is today under challenge. And here I come to the second point, that we've always been used in our industry to look at gas and say gas is clean, gas is cheap, gas is competitive, so everybody will move to gas. But technology proved us wrong. In the short term, we already see some potential, or actually some actual decrease in demand in gas from coal, but also already from energy efficiency and from renewables, particularly in Europe. And if we look to the midterm, we see that basically there is renewables that are being developed. There is energy efficiency projects that are being developed, but very little new gas-fired projects and very little new final gas demand. Even a country like Denmark, for instance, said, don't use gas for heating, use electricity, because we will make electricity from renewables. We will have plenty of electricity. There is a global trend towards electrification of demand, and the case that is gas to power does not hold anymore. There was a recent presentation by car manufacturers saying because Germany is moving to 80% renewable at some point, it's not a matter of shortage of energy when we don't have the renewables, but by then we will have battery storage, and basically we will be able to use all this electricity. And we will also have gas storage, meaning we will turn the electricity into methane, first into hydrogen and then methane. And so from power to gas, from gas to power, we will have in the future power to gas. And that will increasingly decrease the demand for LNG. On the long term, that is the trend, driven, as I mentioned, mainly by battery storage, which is fast growing, and it might catch up in a similar way to what happened to solar panels in the past 5-6 years. So what we see today is that actually the price that will make people invest in new upstream projects, particularly for LNG, is about the same price that will drive gas demand to zero, because people will simply switch to something else, and something that they can deploy in 1 year to 2 years, energy efficiency and renewables. The final point, and then I'm finished, is that, well, even if we didn't have technology, we still have a lot of spare opportunities to increase production, local production. I always mention the case of Italy. We have enough gas to supply 20% of demand for 20 years at 30% cheaper than imports. And imports are cheaper because marginal LNG is on the margin. And so you simply need to say, well, I'll push this local production. Similarly, it can be done in Europe, similarly can be done in Latin America and other places in the world. The second is infrastructure and markets. Once we will have a fully functional energy market in Europe and other places, we will see a similar situation as in the United States, where that will decrease potential marginal demand because you will be allowed and enabled to do cross-border flows more easily. And infrastructure is a similar way. If you look into Europe, TAP or the third stream, they will all add additional alternatives that are consistently cheaper than LNG. And with that, I am done.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here to speak against the motion that this House believes a buyer's market for energy will last beyond 2020, or as I interpreted Marco, that energy has no future at all, and we should probably all pack up and go home. I intend to demonstrate, though, that there are three fundamental things wrong with the position as stated, and I'm going to challenge the legitimacy of its existence even as a statement. You might expect me to focus on the cyclical history of LNG, the fact that over the last 20 years we've seen numerous swings in market between those seemingly favourable to buyers and those favourable to sellers. I could talk about the period in the early to mid-2000s when buyers in Asia secured apparently low price deals for long-term supply. I could talk about the period directly thereafter when the market flipped and sellers were able to achieve contracts with very high oil linkages and apparently favourable conditions to them. I could discuss the impact of movements in oil price costs, the inherent unpredictability of supply and demand side events, such as Fukushima and shut-ins in places like Egypt, Angola and Yemen, which lead to unpredictable but frequent changes in the LNG market, which make a tightening of the supply and demand balance an inevitability. I could say that all of these things are contributing to or indicative of the swings and roundabouts of LNG, and that the apparent oversupply and buyer's market everyone seems to agree we are entering now will inevitably correct, and that is the nature of things. I could do all of these things, and I could probably ask someone in my office much more able than I to do a whole swathe of clever things in Excel to prove the inevitability of a seller-friendly market emerging right on cue at 2020. I could do that, but I'm not going to, for that would be to entirely miss the point. I said there were three things fundamentally wrong with the motion as presented, and those three things are buyer, market, and 2020. Apart from that, it's excellent. Specifically, who exactly are these so-called buyers? What exactly do we mean by the market, and why is 2020 so special anyway? Firstly, the simplified concept of a buyer's or seller's market, the simplified concept of buyers or sellers in LNG is, I'm afraid, completely outdated and fails to recognise fundamental structural changes the market has undergone over the last few years and the inevitable and unstoppable course on which it's now set. In the old world, there were buyers and sellers. Buyers were utilities with monopolies in their markets and with the ability to pass on whatever costs they were exposed to. They wanted straightforward supply and were convinced by sellers to place a premium on securing that supply. But where are these buyers now? I don't see buyers. I see aggregators with portfolios, traders at different stages of evolution. Buyers are sellers now and have set on an irreversible course to be ever more so. Is BG a buyer or a seller? Is Shell, Total? They're all both. What about NG, Iberdrola or NL? Asian utilities are not sitting in their home markets waiting for supply. They have stepped out and they have set up or are setting up trading desks and asset portfolios. They have accepted different risk positions and they will be masters of their own destiny. New markets will emerge. Demand is latent and significant. It will pick up volume and drive evolution and change further. So buyers is a fundamentally outmoded concept, straight from the reactionary world of yesterday. It also fails even to recognise that the latest, greatest and most fundamental development in LNG doesn't even have buyers, it has tollers. Customers of US projects with either straight up tolling or quasi-tolling structures are gas buyers and LNG sellers. They purchase US gas and they sell it in as LNG into the global market. It's a not so subtle indicator of the obsolescence of this question. And now to market. The old world of LNG interpreted market as the pricing level at which long-term contracts could be set. A buyer's market meant lower oil indexation or capping of prices, lower spot prices. A seller's market, the reverse. But I'm afraid the LNG market of today and tomorrow doesn't really work like that anymore. There is fundamentally more choice in acquiring LNG on short-term or spot deals as a tolling customer from the US or as a customer from a traditional multi-train project. Over the next 5 years, even more evolution away from the traditional model will occur. We aren't all the way there yet. A more volatile, rapidly changing and nuanced market emerges. The nature of the new choices, smaller scale projects, quicker implementation means that historical lumpy lurches between over and under supply in the LNG market, which created so-called buyers and sellers markets, are unlikely to happen again. Further, the defining characteristic of these historic markets, the long-term oil-linked contract formula, is becoming less and less relevant. The LNG market is increasingly commoditized and brings with it price volatility and a sharing of that price risk. Finally, what of 2020? What is so special about 2020? It's naive and erroneous to look at 2020 as some sort of watershed because of the volume of LNG which we know is seemingly set to hit the market in the next few years. To equate a high volume of LNG production capacity with a buyer's market. The nature of this supply, the changes in the portfolios and behaviours of the industry participants, and the capacity of the industry to respond more quickly and effectively to market signals means considering the qualitative aspect of that supply is much more valuable than the quantitative. Frankly, I don't know what the market will be like in 2020, what the spot price will be, what, if any, oil-linked long-term contracts are going to be signed. I do know that any concept as simple as a buyer's market is not relevant in the rapidly changing industry of which we're all part. It's the language of the old world and of yesterday. It's the language of those not recognising the changes that have already happened. I reject the simplistic construct of a buyer's market. The future of the LNG market is so much more nuanced, variable, and fundamentally different that such a statement could ever hope to encapsulate.